Alrighty, hello everybody. What's up? This is Jeff, also known as the Revit Kid. We are currently live from Connecticut, and looks like there's already 50 or 60 of you in here, which is pretty awesome. And we got people from all over the place. Welcome to another Revit Kid or BIM After Dark Happy Hour. Like I said in the last one, I think just based on what's going on in the world, these are kind of prudent to do more of these live happy hours, and it seems like you guys enjoy them. So we did one last week, and we're doing one this week, although this week is going to be pretty fun. I've got some special guests, some surprise guests, so I think you guys all know who I am. Before I jump into the guest, if you haven't yet, make sure you subscribe to my YouTube channel. I'm going to be doing more of these, and it's easy to get notifications when you do that. But without further ado, I'm going to introduce you guys to our guests. So we have the famous Paul Aubin and the even more famous Marcello. Famous for...
You only have one name, you're more famous.
No. No, actually, it's funny. So I was thinking back in time and sort of trying to remember sort of my first introductions or interactions with you guys and like how we sort of came to meet and whatnot. And so, Marcello, I know you and I, the first time we ever met was at Built or RTCNA, but I remember, and Paul, maybe you're at this, but way back when, it was probably like 2011, 12, maybe even before that, and Autodesk used to hold blogger events where they would have us come into the Autodesk headquarters and like talk about some of the new features that were coming out in the next release of Revit. And then we would basically have our posts ready to go. And then when they lifted the NDAs, we could just press publish. And so I remember being in Waltham, Massachusetts, and Steve Stafford, David Light, you get on the list, Dave Baldacchino, all these big Revit bloggers at the time were all there. And this was really close to the time when you created the elephant, Marcello. And I remember one of the Autodesk guys complaining that Marcello wouldn't share how he did the elephant in Revit at the time. And I think that was the very first time I heard your name ever being spoke. And then you became Marcello the elephant guy from that tape.
Yeah, I suppose.
And then Paul, I know you and I have gone way back, and I just want to thank you because over time you've helped me, you've given me a lot of advice and looked over a lot of the courses and stuff. So thanks for that. It's crazy to think that it's been 10 or 11 years since I started doing all this Revit stuff and blogging, and we've probably all known each other for that long now, right? I mean,
exactly.
It's nuts.
So now that you're not a kid anymore, what's it like to still be the Revit kid?
I'm okay with it. It's funny. My dad actually, his nickname growing up was the Kid, and this had no relationship at the time to me being called the Revit Kid, but because he was always considered a little more immature and always doing kid stuff. And to this day now, he's still called the Kid as well. So I'm like, I guess I could hold on to it. Why not?
Yeah,
it still works. I mean, I guess I'm still a kid.
Me and the old guy.
Yeah, relatively, I can still be a kid in a lot of circles, so I'm okay with that. So for anyone who doesn't know who these folks are, I guess, Paul, maybe you want to go first and sort of introduce yourself to the YouTube streaming world.
Yeah, believe it or not, it's my first YouTube stream.
Wow.
Yeah. Wow. I'm usually a pre-recorded kind of guy.
I know, all over LinkedIn Learning. I've seen lots of your ads lately.
Right. Well, speaking of pre-recorded, that's my big claim to fame, I guess, is LinkedIn Learning, which was formerly lynda.com.
Mm-hmm.
Lots of Revit and other AEC-focused courses, mostly Revit. Mm-hmm. And before that, written some books, and way back in my dark past, an architect. So I come at all this from an architectural perspective and really just interested and passionate about teaching people the software in whatever medium makes sense to them. So whether it's print or video or face-to-face training, that's what I try and do.
Awesome. And I'm sure a lot of people have heard, or at least if they didn't know who you were, they've probably seen your picture on Lynda or on a book or something like that. If they're learning Revit, right? Let's be real.
What I always tell people in live training is, if you're saying to yourself, boy, this guy's voice sounds really familiar, then you've probably watched one of my courses on LinkedIn Learning or lynda.com.
Right,
so,
right, exactly. Awesome. Well, thanks again for being here. I appreciate it, guys. And so,
thanks for asking me.
And then Marcello, who maybe doesn't have as many of those books and videos, but I think he's got his own claim to fame within our little community here. So, Marcello, you want to introduce yourself a little bit?
Sure. Hello, I'm Marcello Sgambelluri. Where do I start? I guess I've been in the industry for 21 years now. I started out as a structural engineer. Then I started looking at how to push software to its limits, and that's what you made reference to, Jeff. Yeah, I built an elephant in Revit, and I just at the time I just wanted to push Revit to its limits, but then I got requests to show the world how to do it. So I eventually did that, and that started a whole new course for my AEC, I guess, professional career. So a big thing what I do is I create content and help share it across the world. I teach in conferences. I present all over the world. I run a blog site called simplycomplex.org. It's got a YouTube channel, a comic book, a podcast, um, and so I just kind of been on that track to see how we could use the software in the industry, how to push it to its limits, and then how to really teach it effectively so everyone could kind of learn it and simplify it so everyone could kind of understand it. So that's the position I came in. So I'm always looking forward to new software out there and how it could change our industry for the better.
Awesome. Yeah.
Was that good enough?
No, that was perfect.
Mm-hmm.
So if anyone ever gets to see Marcello's name on a class at a conference you're going to, definitely take the class, even if it's for like RAM structure that you have no interest or desire in. I can tell you right now, you will find something from it, because one of the things that one of the things that Marcello is great at is presenting. So kudos to you on that one.
Be entertained, for sure.
You will definitely be entertained.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, it comes from a place of really trying to connect with the audience and trying to let them learn what I'm teaching. So there's you see the refined version. If you Google my name or you look at any of the stuff on Ottersk University, you kind of see the refined version, but there's a lot of prep that goes into it. And Paul Aubin, you as well. And I know you teach too, Jeff. It's just about connecting with the audience and trying to make it entertaining and fun and making sure everyone has a good time.
Yeah, definitely. So thank you guys again. Thanks for coming and taking the time. We're gonna hang out for about an hour. If we run out of things to say, we can finish early, but I doubt that's gonna be the case. Let's be real. For those of you watching online, we're kind of doing Ask Me Anything style. So just ask away in the chat box. I'm going to be trying to follow it along as we discuss. There were a couple emails that came in with questions, so thanks again for that, for those of you who did. I guess while we wait for some questions, maybe you guys want to talk about what you're doing right now, sort of any new projects or anything you're kind of focused on. Maybe Paul, if you want to start.
Yeah, sure. Well, what I'm working on right now is actually prepping a re-record of BIM 360 design. So last time I recorded that was about 2 years ago. It was in Revit 2018. So Revit 2021 is about to drop. I've been real busy the last few weeks recording courses. So my last trip before the embargo, the quarantine, whatever we're calling this, shelter in place, was actually out recording Revit Essential Training 2021. So when the product releases here shortly, usually it's sometime in April, then we'll have training ready to go, Revit Essential Training. And then following that up pretty shortly after that, it'll be BIM 360 Design, an update for that with all the, it's tougher with cloud software, right? Because to say what version, like I don't even know how I would describe the version that I recorded it on the first time, but there's obviously been quite a bit that's changed in the 1.5 to 2 years since I recorded it. So we're going to try and capture as many of those things as possible and get that in there. But it's a challenging course to record because you have to pretend you're 3 or 4 different people at the same time, and I kind of have a laptop running and a virtual machine and another, this way I can be logged in as different people and switch between them, and you have all these personas and you're like, wait, which user am I logged in as right now? And so it's challenging, but that's what's currently occupying my time around any other stuff that happens to be going on. I mean, recording from home is challenging because I don't get rid of all the other distractions that normally I can do when I go to the booth. So
Yes.
But
Yes.
We're getting to it. So,
As someone who has a 17-month at home, I get
yeah,
it.
yeah.
You'll notice most of my videos it's dark behind me for a reason.
Nighttime when it's quiet.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I used to be the same way when mine were little.
Yeah.
I would get up at 4 a.m. because that was the only time it was quiet in the house.
Yeah, most certainly. Marcello, anything new going on over there, or did he drop out? He might have dropped out. I know he said he might have to drop out for a little bit and come back. So
Oh, he had a
yeah,
work
awesome,
coming. Yeah. Oh, he says be right back. Yeah.
awesome. Okay,
All right.
cool. Well, yeah. So yeah, definitely recording courses is definitely a a
Well, you've
challenge.
got some experience with that too. But
Yeah.
so now, do you do yours out of the house there?
I
You
do.
don't have a sound booth you go to,
I do
right?
them right here.
Yeah, right there. That's
I
your
do them
sound
right
booth.
here. Exactly.
Well,
So
this is mine now as well as.
yep, and I've been going through similar things where I'm updating some of the courses now. If you guys joined my live session last week, I launched the beta version of a community site. So now instead of the courses being individual courses, it's a community site for BIM After Dark. And so part of the reason for that is to be able to do these live updates and keep it all flowing, because things change so dramatically in the system. And so we have 33 beta members right now, and it's closed. I'll send out information when it reopens, but the idea is those members are there now. We're interacting, checking out the content, and getting it really, really primed and ready for public release. But so I've been focused on that a little bit, and also it's funny going back through some of the content. And you said 2018. I've got one or two courses that are 2015, 2016 Revit. And it's like, yeah, not everything has changed, but enough has changed where you got to figure out, some of the stuff is exactly the same, but it kind of makes sense to do it in the new version just because of the look and feel of it, And so the techniques are the same, but you kind of have to re-record it anyway. So
Yeah, well, right. Don't even get me talking about my books that are way out of date, like 2015, 2014. So,
right.
I don't want to promise anything here in a live, broadcast, but I am seriously considering getting around to finally doing an update to at least one of those books here very shortly. I figure with all this time at home, and I had almost a 3-week trip planned that's obviously canceled. So I'm like, well, maybe I should just leave that block on my calendar and try and get the book updated, see what happens. But again,
Right.
no promises, but I'm still holding on to that as a possibility. So we'll see,
Awesome. So we did actually have some questions coming as we're chatting, and
All right.
so one of them is regarding Twinmotion. So Paul, one of the things that I've also been focusing on is over the last 3 months or so, I've been studying and reviewing and really digging into the
Yeah, I watched your video.
so the
Yeah.
what I consider sort of the three main real-time rendering programs, and so that's kind of been a big focus of mine, just generally speaking. And so the question is about Twinmotion, and Ryan asked Ryan is a beta member of BIM After Dark, so thank you so much,
right.
dude. And so he asked about he's bringing a round building into Twinmotion. He's having issues with texture mapping, and so he's asking if there's a way to fix it. So if anyone out there has used Twinmotion, what you'll see is that the way the FBX exporter works from Revit, sometimes it does some really strange things with converting to polygons and triangles, and unfortunately the UV mapping can be a little goofy. So you'll see it on some curved objects and round and like spherical objects, and you'll also see it on topography if you have Revit topography. So one of the things you could try and do is there's a little checkbox that says fix UV when you're importing it, and it fix mapping I think it is, and it'll almost do it, but unfortunately, other than trying to rotate your textures and deal with it, there is no fix at the moment, unfortunately. And so that also sometimes happens on
That little
Lumion.
scale thing, right? Do you think that would help at all, or?
Yeah, so if you rotate the stuff enough and you mess with it, but if you have, let's say if you think about topography and you have it sweeping along and there's a bunch of triangles, it doesn't know what direction to put the UV map in, and because it's all the same map, it's kind of hard to tweak. And so if someone has a solution on the chat, feel free to do it to talk about it. But I haven't found any solutions yet, and if you look on the Twinmotion forums, it seems like no one else did. Somebody asked right after that, will Autodesk ever kill Revit server? I guess that was in response to your BIM 360 conversation, maybe.
Oh yeah, maybe. I have not heard any.
I mean, there's all this talk about Forge and the platforms and all that. So
Yeah.
maybe eventually when all that stuff happens and they start integrating everything on the same cloud platform and stuff, maybe, I mean, the way everyone talks about it is that the end goal is to have it all in one location and not have all these, servers and riverbeds and expanding. You're really just bandwidth and sitting on the cloud, right? But
all
where
that
we
stuff's
are,
thing, to be perfectly honest, and you've got to have the IT expertise to keep it all running and the bandwidth. And I love BIM 360 design. I use it a lot of times just for projects that I'm working on solo, just because it's just so damn convenient to just, and I've been on it in hotel Wi-Fi, and it's been fine, performance-wise, which I don't think we could say about Revit server or
no, I mean,
or any of that
right,
stuff, so.
right, or VPNs and servers, and so I mean, it gets fishy, right? I mean, it's
but it does cost. So I totally get that, from a firm's point of view. I mean, right now is a perfect time to try it because they've got that sort of embargo on cost for the moment, given our current climate. So if you've been on the fence on BIM 360, it's free, I think, until May, and who knows if they'll extend that. Definitely want to work with the reseller because there are some tricky issues if you do the beta and then you want to switch over to live. Like your actual Revit.
This is for 360 design or team, whatever it's called now.
Yeah, like if you set up a totally sandbox kind of beta site, and then you decide, oh, I like this, I want to now put it in my real Autodesk account.
Right.
That can get tricky to impossible depending on how complicated your setup is.
Right.
And you definitely need to involve a reseller to do it. There's no way for you to sort of self-service do that. So if you're contemplating that at all, having a conversation with your reseller would be the best way to go, because they would be able to discourage you from setting it up in a way that would then make it a dead end later. So I don't know all the gory details, and it gets very obtuse, so I don't want to necessarily get into that here on the call. I just want to caution you that if you're thinking about that, it's worth the phone call to the reseller and talk to them about the right way to do it, so that you can save yourself some pain in the future if you decide to keep it live. So
I've noticed, and I think this is probably by design, but the more the cloud software is involved, the more you're talking to the resellers and middlemen to set it up and do all of that. I mean, I think that's probably by design, right?
Probably
the subscription / resell. I get it, but that's a good point. I think you're right. One of the things actually that someone asked, they asked, is the new course you're talking about going to be on LinkedIn Learning? Is that what you're making it for?
Yeah. All the video training I do is on LinkedIn Learning. So
Paul is LinkedIn Learning.
Well, I wouldn't say that, but lynda.com is eventually, at the moment, you can get there both platforms, right? So for those of you that know about lynda.com, it's the same platform. So what happened was, several years back, lynda.com was acquired by LinkedIn. They rebranded as LinkedIn Learning, and it's been this slow process of eventually phasing out the lynda.com brand and having it be exclusively LinkedIn Learning. But if you have an account on lynda.com, you get access to all the same content. The content is exactly the same in both platforms. It's just eventually they would like to see everything be LinkedIn Learning. And I don't know when the day is where they'll flip the switch and you can no longer use lynda.com.
Right.
I suspect they will do that very carefully once they are sure that everybody has been properly informed. But yeah, so if that's the root of the question, it's not a one or the other. It's not like you're getting less of a subscription if you're on lynda.com. But I just refer to everything as LinkedIn Learning right now to kind of help people get used to the new name. Yeah.
That's cool. So I was reading through some of the stuff as you were chatting. Do you guys think Revit will ever be available for Mac? No.
Yeah, doubtful.
just no. I don't even say it. No hope at all. That's not going to happen. If it would have, I mean, it would have happened by now. Let's be honest.
Yeah, most likely. Although I don't know, it took 20 something years for AutoCAD to come on the Mac. So
that's true.
You know?
And that was software that they built, right?
Yeah. So
hey, Eric Murray. Hey, man. Eric Murray is actually my very first boss, which is pretty sweet. When I was 16, I started working there. So what's up, Eric? Hope all is well. I haven't seen you in a while. Him and I learned Revit together. Sort of sitting in a small chair in the back of his office, learning Revit together.
Very cool.
Which is pretty sweet. I'm just reading through some of these. Oh, cool. Dave Peterson is running 235 seats of 360 design. I love it until it breaks. Well, I mean...
Well, you can say that about any software.
I know. That's 235 seats of Outlook will break, depending on how you're setting it up, right?
Yeah.
And then Ryan followed up from the Twinmotion question and said he's using LiveSync. He said, do you recommend using that? So for those of you not familiar, Lumion has it as well. This is it's kind of like Enscape for these programs, where you click it and it automatically launches the software. It's kind of like a live link. I honestly never use it in either program, just because when I'm using a Twinmotion or a Lumion, I like the idea of it being a snapshot of the model at that time. You're building a scene and it's there. Whereas like an Enscape is nice if you're keeping it up as sort of a render, or a design. Seeing it live, building it as it's going, it's a much smoother workflow than that. I don't know. And I know Lumion has it, and I've tried it. It's just, I don't know. I for some reason, I like the idea of sort of export, boom, you got it here. If you make a big change, you just refresh it and you're good to go. But sometimes the live sync, I think I want Revit to move faster, and I don't want to have that delay between the two softwares and stuff. So
interesting.
I don't think that has any effect on what you're talking about with the textures, to be honest, but maybe it does. I don't know. But it happens in the other version too.
I had a question for you, Jeff, on that. Since you have a little more Twinmotion experience than I do, I mean, I literally have done the tutorial and that's about it.
Right.
Although their tutorials are wonderful. So
they are. They have a huge library, and Lumion, I have to give them credit too. If you, they're a little harder to find, but if you find them, they do have a huge library of video tutorials. It's just for some reason they're a lot harder to find than the Twinmotion ones. But either way,
I don't love the player. Okay, I love the content. But the player was a bit janky. I mean, it was like these little tiny windows and weird resizing, and you had to. I like to play at double speed, and you have to do that over and over again for every video. It doesn't remember that.
Oh,
so,
okay. Yep.
Yeah, little nitpick stuff there, but the content was fantastic. But I'm just curious. Like, Twinmotion is so much easier than just going right into Unreal Engine.
Yes.
But I'm curious, with all the interactive that's in Unreal, have you played with that at all? And can you take a Twinmotion project into the Unreal Engine and then add interactivity and the zones that light things up when you get close and make an experience out of it?
Yeah, unfortunately you can't. So Twinmotion is built on the Unreal platform, but it's just that it's a UI front end, and so there is no interoperability, unfortunately. And so if you want to use all of that, you're basically forced to use Unreal, which the reality is the workflow is not that different. It's just it becomes a lot harder. Like Twinmotion takes
a tougher interface, but
yeah. The reality is you are doing the same thing. You're bringing in FBX. You're applying materials, and then you're building a scene. But when you're on an Unreal, you're dealing with custom libraries. It's not set up for architectural visualization, right? But you do, on the other hand, you do get all those awesome interactivities and stuff like that. So, I mean, I've already done a actually, I should probably open it because I think people would like seeing this anyways. I've done some animation style stuff in Twinmotion, just trying to sort of force the issue to see what I can get out of it. Without having to go into like an Unreal. And so there's ways to sort of trick some of the custom path things that they have. So we're going to see how this works. This is going to be fascinating. So for everyone out there, I'm using Jitsi right now to do this entire stream, which thanks to Phil Reed out there for tweeting about it. But really cool piece of software so far. I think so, at least. And so who knows what's going to happen.
First time with that too.
Yeah, I don't know. I honestly don't know what's going to happen. But so I'm sharing my screen, so I'm hoping everyone sees the screen.
Well, don't crash. Okay.
Can't make any promises there. Although this is Twinmotion 2019, so this scene should be okay. We'll see. So I probably should open the file first. Yeah, let me open the file first. And I'll stop sharing. I'll open the file when I say stop sharing. But once it opens, I'll show everyone sort of how some of the ways that I was able to work around the limitations for animations and stuff. So just trying to read through a few of these. You got a lot of fans out there, Paul, who are saying thank you.
Thanks.
A lot of people, it sounds like they've used your Lynda stuff and you've helped them. So kudos to Paul for that.
Well, happy to help. Glad to hear you guys found it useful.
Yeah. A few people are talking about some of the issues they're having with crashing on Twinmotion. One of the things I'll tell you guys with 2020 that I noticed is if you're pulling in custom materials and those are in any location other than on your local hard drive, there's for some reason there's always an issue. So I like to keep, and honestly I did it in Lumion too, is I keep the scenes and everything I can on my local C drive regardless of where I'm working, and then end of the day or whatever, you put stuff back on the server if that's what you want. It's just with these programs.
It's interesting you said that because I had a crash. So anywhere in the C drive or just?
I think as long as it's on the C drive, you should be okay or better at least.
All right.
But if you're hitting any other, especially network locations, I've noticed that you can run into some issues. So I try to use my exports, my materials, saving everything locally, and then just saving them on a daily basis or whatever to a server. I did the same with Lumion because the reality is most of the time these scenes, especially the ones I'm working on, they're getting 4 or 5 gigs in size, right? And so you don't want to be saving 4 or 5 gigs to a server, especially now through VPN. But if it was even not through VPN, you're asking for some trouble depending on what server you have. So that may help. That may help you guys on some of your Twinmotion and Lumion issues if you've ever run into some issues with that, which is pretty cool. But yeah, I have noticed some. I've been trying to pinpoint some of the crashes in 2020. One of the issues I did notice too is opening 2019 files immediately in 2020 for Twinmotion. There must be some sort of nuggets in there that don't translate very well. There's no support documentation on working backwards or forward on it, but I've tried both, and the most unstable files that I have are ones where I started in 2019 and said, let me just try this in 2020 and add some things.
Okay. Well, luckily for me, I'm going right to 2020. So
yes, you're good. Exactly. All right. So my file finally opened here. So I'm going to share my screen, and we're going to try and see. I'm going to jump into presenter mode, so hopefully everyone can sort of generally see.
Am I the only boring one drinking coffee for this, or?
I don't know. I guess it depends on where everyone else is in the world. Usually my question when we start is, where are you from and what are you drinking? But today with an Ask Me Anything, I figured I would just ask a question. But if you guys feel like letting us know what you're drinking, sure. This is going to be interesting because I'm sure this is not going to stream well, so I'm going to try and work pretty slow. And this
it looks like it's trying, but I'm not seeing your screen yet. So
no. Okay. They may be seeing it then.
Oh, okay.
Let me see if they're seeing it. Yeah.
If they're seeing it, that's more important. So
let's see. I can see. Looks like some people are seeing it. Okay, so sorry, Paul. You can watch it afterwards, I guess.
I'll watch the recording.
Exactly. I'm gonna have to get out of this. Okay. So basically, what I'm showing them, since you can't apparently see it, is a scene that I created, and I'm gonna open up a phase where there's basically some phasing. There's construction activity going on, and I used custom paths to host hoists, basically. So if I jump over to this. It's really weird because my screen's really fast, but then I'm seeing it over on the right, and it's lagging because it's sharing it. And I'm going to try and go really slow for you guys because I'm sure over the webs this is not working very well. But what I'm looking at right now is actually there's 2 hoists that are going up and down a building, Paul. And the way those are made is if I press G on my keyboard, which shows the helpers, I have a custom path going up the hoist tower. And then I hosted an object to that. So then because you can host single objects to custom paths, and you can just make them go up and down. And so that's one way where you can start, if you're clever enough with how you do your paths, you can actually start moving things along buildings and like, I don't know if you can rotate, but you can definitely move things up and down and use physics. So there may be some things you can get away with from there. So hopefully everyone saw that. I'm going to check the chat right now to make sure everyone can see that, or at least kind of saw that. Let me see here. I apparently don't have enough screens to do all of this.
Yeah, awesome. I don't know if I'm watching. Oh,
people can see it.
Clicked the wrong link. I'm seeing your happy hour from last week. I was trying to load it up on YouTube so I could watch it that way, but man. That's all right. Yeah,
that's all right. I have the stream here. I have the chat here. I have OBS going, which is running it.
I know, right?
I'm probably.
That's why I said don't crash.
Yeah, I'd be amazed if I'm not just moving like 2 frames per second for everybody. But it looks like everyone saw it, which is pretty sweet. Awesome. So what it was is basically, being able to use custom paths are basically your only way to kind of animate things. And so if you place a custom path, you can host a custom object, including imported objects, and you can make them move. And you can make them start and stop. You can make them loop. You can duplicate them. Like, one of the things we do is we show prefabricated mechanical penthouses coming down. So it's just the same path, but dropping in different things. So it can be done.
That's a cool idea. Yeah. And again, the tutorial showed people walking along, but in cars moving. So that's a cool way of using that.
Exactly. So it's definitely it's not like straightforward and easy, but it works. And I think actually Marcello just jumped back on, and it reminded me of and Marcello, I'll give you some credit for this one for sure. I remember way back in, I think it was maybe Stone Mountain, Georgia. You did the class on CryEngine. Remember that? Oh, you're muted, by the way, Marcello. Or you were. You might be. So
I do remember, yes.
Yes. So after that, I tried it as well. And then I've tried some other video games. So you've had experience using, default video game engines to do these things. And as you found out, and I found out, and probably anyone who's ever tried Unreal or Unity by itself, it can work, but it takes a hell of a lot of effort to get it for architectural visualization, right? It's not... And so that's where like things like Twinmotion and Lumion are nice, because they just put a UI on top of it that just makes all of those headaches so much easier. Those brute force. And I remember CryEngine was really bad because bringing in, remember the way the FBXs came in, and you had to kind of do them like one at a time, piece by piece, or something weird. I'm trying to remember what it was. It didn't bring them in by material; it brought them in by object or something like that. It's a long time. Yeah,
it's a lot better now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
FBX came in by object or by category or something goofy, and so it was like, if you think about Revit and objects, there's a lot of them. And so it was definitely a nightmare. Oh, and then somebody mentioned also...
So we're talking about Twinmotion?
Yes, yeah. So somebody asked a question about...
paths and people walking out paths. Yeah, so Jeff, I have a question for you. Yeah. Is Twinmotion now able to be opened in the Unreal Game Engine now, or not yet?
So that's kind of the question Paul asked was, what's the relationship between the two? And it's still just sitting on top of it. But what they're doing is it seems like they're migrating the features that people may want in Twinmotion from Unreal and giving you access to more. That's kind of like even the some of the graphic stuff for 2020 where they already existed in Unreal. Some of the higher resolution reflections and different things like that. And so they were just migrating those over. So I think they're trying to give you as much as you can without bloating it up as much. I don't know. The draw to Twinmotion, like Paul said, is that it's so easy to learn. And I mean, Unreal's not hard, but it's also not easy. When you open it up at first, there's a lot going on there. But somebody did mention, and I should have brought it up, that FBX files also save animations. So, and we did this in Lumion too. If we needed to make an animation of like pieces of a building moving or dropping or something like that, you can do them in like 3D Max or something, export as an FBX and bring it in. So something like a door opening or something goofy like that, you could just do it in 3D Max and save it as an FBX, and it would work too. I guess is one way around it.
Okay.
Let me see.
Yeah, because I noticed that the when you're walking through, a door is a barrier. Like it doesn't just, or a wall.
When you go to walk mode,
yeah. You can't just like go through the wall.
Right. And so, I mean, when I'm doing them for virtual walkthroughs and stuff, I'm always, the doors we want them to go through, I'm always opening anyways. And the doors we don't want them to go through, we're keeping closed. So that's kind of the cue. And in most software, right, like Enscape, you can walk through. It's kind of nice, actually, where it's a barrier. So that sometimes you don't want people going through every door, depending on what you're doing.
Yeah.
So I guess it can go
Just
either
like when
way.
you have a party at your house, right?
You can turn off physics, but if you turn on walk mode, I don't think it matters or something like that. So I don't know. Yeah, let me just see if there was a few chats going on there, so I wanted to make sure we didn't miss anything. Does Enscape, Lumion, Twinmotion have a viewer client? So Joe asked, does Enscape, Lumion, or Twinmotion have a viewer that a client can use? Yes, they all do. So Enscape has two versions of it. You can export to a .exe and send them a .exe, which isn't always the best because .exes usually get flagged by everyone's servers anyways and get removed, and they're usually larger. But they do have a web version too, so you can publish to the web, send a link. I don't know now. I haven't tried it in a couple versions or a couple releases. It used to be a limited. They limited some of the shading and lighting in the web version. It didn't look as great. Why is it not changing to me? Maybe they've updated that a little bit. Lumion has a similar thing too. They have a My Lumion. I don't even know what it's called anymore, where you can publish to a web. I think that one is a stationary though, where it's a 360 of spaces and you click views. And then Twinmotion has a exe type of exporter. It used to be called BIM Motion. Now it's called Presenter. Right now, I actually like BIM Motion better because in BIM Motion you could flip through phasing without setting up cameras. Now what you have to do is set up a camera that has the phase that you want identified, and then you go through cameras only. But either way, all of them have some form of being able to share with people, which is pretty sweet. Somebody asked if it's a time machine on the table behind you, Paul. I'm assuming they're talking about all the gears, maybe.
Okay, so there's a couple things back here. This is a wooden clock that I built for my mom.
Wow, look at that thing.
So this thing is not working at the moment, and I have to figure out which gear is, binding. Like it'll go and then it gets stuck. But there's this guy in Hawaii that makes these plans. So I didn't design this. I bought the plans, but then you go on your scroll saw and you cut. Like I manually cut each one of these gears, tooth by tooth on the scroll saw. So it's you glue the pattern on there and you assemble the whole thing. So it was a fun project to do. This particular one uses an electromagnet that you also have to build. So you had to spin the wire around there so that it runs with power. But the other plans, most of his plans use a pendulum and you wind them, like a traditional clock. So anyway, I can. Since I mentioned it, do you do show notes for this stuff?
Yeah. So you can send
so
me
I'll
links.
get Jeff the link to his website. He's got dozens of plans out there. So if any of you are mill workers or woodworkers and want to try your hand at building a wooden clock, you can buy a set of plans and do that. This one was a kit that it's a little heavier, so I'm going to leave it right where it is.
Solar system.
But yeah, it's sort of it's technically called a telarium because it's the sun, the Earth, and the moon. But you can turn it on and it will, all the gears are sized correctly to kind of, so I'm kind of a geek about those sort of things, So anyway, that was a kit that you buy and assemble it. And I don't think it's available anymore. You could probably have to find it on eBay or something, one of those sites, because I don't think they sell them anymore. And then you can't have this. This is probably the last set of Clorox wipes in existence right now. So
I know.
Running low there.
Someone's gonna find your house in Chicago just to get those, man. Right?
That's right. I'm gonna have
Paul's
people
got
coming in there. But yeah, that's what those are back there. I assume that's what folks were asking about because there's nothing else really interesting back there.
Yeah.
So
there was a couple follow-ups. They were asking about 3D printing it, and then have you built it in Revit yet?
Well, the answer is yes to both of those things, right? So I have a really crappy little 3D printer right here, which was also am I going the right way?
Yep,
Did I miss
see
it?
Yeah.
This guy right here. It was a kit these guys aren't around anymore. It was called PrinterBot. They have since closed their doors. And I did do a little, before I went on the scroll saw, I did do a little prototype to try, not this particular clock, but a simpler set. And it sort of worked. I did it down a scaled down version because this thing only has a 100 millimeter bed, or sorry, 100 centimeter bed. Right. No, 100 millimeters. I think it was right the first time, right? 100 centimeters. Anyway, 10 centimeters, whatever that is.
10,
100 millimeters. I'm 4 inches. All right. Sorry. I'm having a hard time translating my millimeters in my head. So it was a really small one, but I did do a 3D print. It is theoretically possible to do it, but you probably want a higher quality 3D printer to get nicer gears that don't bind up and what have you. And what was the second part of the question?
Did you build it in Revit yet?
Oh, yeah. And then one of the other plans that I haven't cut yet, that I bought the set of plans, and let me see if I can. You keep going, and I'll try and load it up in Revit, and I can actually show it.
So then we actually have, I think, 2 questions that probably could be geared towards you, Marcello. The first one is definitely geared towards you. You are muted, by the way, Marcello. I think you somehow went on to mute again.
Okay, there we go.
First, people are asking if those are lightsabers behind your head. I don't think we've had this discussion initially, but I think you should tell the public that they are.
Okay, you want me to answer that now?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yes, those are lightsabers behind me. They are. Yes, that's my lightsaber collection. Actually, it's a bit nerdy, I think, but that's okay. Yeah, I've kind of made a collection. I got 2 boys, and we went to Disneyland, and you can make your own custom sabers. So some are custom, some are not, and I actually labeled them as well. I guess that's pretty.
Is that a pool cue holder? Or
yeah, and and to mount them, I used a pull cue holder. That's exactly right, and just modified it a little bit.
Nice.
You can see the little labels down on the bottom there. I struggled with how to label those, but I found out engraving is actually very expensive. So what I did was, you know, what's actually the cheapest thing to engrave is actually dog tags. So they're all little individual.
Did you go to like Petco and have them made?
$1.50 each.
Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome.
Yeah. That's what those are. If you don't recognize them, that's on the end there. That's yeah. You got it. Yep. Anyway, I've got more than that's up there, but yes, that's
really?
what those are.
Oh, nice.
Okay, what's the next one?
So this is a Revit question now. And I think we all probably have opinions on it, but I think it'd be interesting hearing from your side of things because, if I'm not mistaken, you're on the structural side of things in your day job, Marcello, right?
Yes.
Yes. So the question is, what's your opinion about a master file in Revit for printing purposes, where you link in all the models to create sheets? So I think this is sort of if you have larger projects and maybe you have to break them up into parts. Maybe it's multiple houses, maybe it's a bigger building, and then where do you do your documentation? And so I know everyone kind of have opinions on this, but it'd be interesting to hear what your experience with that is.
Yeah. Now, are we also talking about all disciplines in one model as well, or that's a whole nother conversation?
I think we can probably go both directions, but I think in general it'd be either your own discipline or the architect or something. But sounds like what's happening is if you have multiple models.
Okay.
Yeah.
Here's been my experience with all that. If you've got like a large campus and you've got multiple buildings, right? Do you model everything in one RVT, or do you model separate RVTs and link them in and so on? How do you manage all that? What do you document?
Yep.
Okay. Just from my experience and what I've had to deal with the last 12 years or so. Either way is actually acceptable. What the current method that my office uses is they actually model each individual building as a separate RVT file, and then link it in, and then choose. I'm going to put in quotes a master to do all the documentation. Is the reason is what we found that to be the best way is it gave enough flexibility for when things change. And I don't mean changing like the project changing. What tends to happen is when a project starts out, some information you don't know that could be, if you don't build in the flexibility, can be catastrophic. So for example, if if for example, you don't have the initial site topography and all that information up front, because I don't know, for whatever reason, a lot of civils get on late, landscape architects, things like that. So if there's initial data and it's not quite right, and then everything is modeled in one particular file, say 4, 5, 10 buildings, whatever, and then the final grading comes out, whether it's touched or the final. You know what I mean by final? I mean, they actually did a really good survey and found out exactly what's out there.
Right.
99% of the time, the initial estimates assumptions that you made were not correct. So when a building has to move in elevation, one versus another, it becomes a big headache to have to put in dummy levels and things like that, especially when you have buildings connect with connectors, those types of things. Just from in that regard, our office takes the approach of modeling each individual. Now, if that wasn't the case and there was no flexibility needed to be modeled in as the lifetime of the design of the project, then I'm all for modeling it in one. But because of the flexibility that allows you, then we've kind of learned our lesson. So that's kind of our take on it. And then quite honestly, because we're in the structural subdiscipline, we usually don't have that choice, quite honestly, because the architect is the one who will initially be laying it all out. But if we do see situations where everything is modeled in one, we tend to have a nice conversation with who's ever leading the principal designer. And we tell them, listen, do you have enough flexibility built into this in case final survey comes back and that's 5 or 10 feet lower, that sort of thing. And it's a conversation on, and it usually ends up with it all modeled kind of separately and then linked in. Now I know the problem is with the documentation, but I think
in that
one is tend to outweigh the other.
Yeah. So if you're doing the multiple models, are you still trying to document in one file, or you're doing the documents in all the individuals?
Still trying to document in one file.
Yeah. Which has its own challenges, but
it has its own challenges. Yeah, but I mean, quite honestly, we've actually done it both ways, and it's still a lot of that is still laid out with how a lot of it is quite honestly still laid out with the principal designer, so which is usually the architect. Like, how are they laying out? Where are their section boxes? Because what we try to do as structural engineers is we try to make the structural set as compatible with the architectural set. So as like views are very similar, that sort of thing, so that they kind of become these like symbiont documents, as opposed to us, meaning the structural kind of documenting it one way, and then the architect documenting it another way. So that plays into a lot of it as well.
No, that's good. I think that's a cool perspective on it. I think
as a contractor, right, you tend to want to have things kind of line up, right? Like you flip that sheet, that plan, floor plan, whatever, and you flip to the structural. That's A101. You flip to the structural S101. All same, everything same scale, everything lined up. It makes just life a little easier.
That would be nice, huh?
And that happens in every project, right?
Yeah.
I think one of the real challenges too is if you make a decision and you change your mind, there's no real good way to move sheets from project to project. I mean, there's some third-party tools that kind of do it, but I think that's probably where the root of the question is. It's not like you can just decide something and then change your mind later. You really have to live with your decision.
You're stuck with it. Everyone's stuck with it forever, and that's kind of where Marcello was getting at, right? I guess to put a little bow on it, I think from my experience, having as an architect and then now working on the contractor side too, I think there's sort of twofold. I remember the very first project where I documented through a link was in Revit 2010 or 11, and the reason we did it was because do you guys remember the 8 or 16 gigabyte switch or whatever? Remember that? So this was back in those days where we physically couldn't actually open a model that was as big as the building, so we had to do it. And this was like 2011 or 12 where they let you tag rooms through a link. It was like the first time they let you do that, and so that was the first time and that was literally a software limitation. Our computers didn't have the RAM to open a model, and so that was the first time I did it. But now on the contractor side, seeing everyone's models from, HOK to SOM to, you go on the list, I've seen lots of ways of doing it. Honestly, I don't think it matters all that much in the end results, other than those things that you were saying, Marcello. But I think where, in general, having the ability to decide ahead of time, having the right discussions ahead of time as to why you're doing it, carrying it through, and then letting everyone know down the road why it's done that way and set up that way. And that's for any model setup, not just the way you're doing documentation. But the thing that we find the most on the contractor side is trying to understand how models were linked in, coordinate systems they were used, what was going on. I can't even tell you how many models I have where someone linked in the model and moved the link to do their work. And that is that just ruins everything, right? And so to me, I think one of the benefits of doing like a documentation file, which I've seen that too, where it's like a blank file and everything's just loaded in there, is unless you're moving links, of course. If you're not moving links, it's a good way to see when things aren't lining up, like when maybe the MEP or the civil guy was using the wrong shared base point or something like that, because it comes in and you're like, where the hell is it? And so to me, at least, that's some sort of a check against it. But to sort of wrap it all up, I think making that decision in the beginning, deciding why you're doing it, and then documenting it and letting everyone know why it's happening that way all the way down the road, right, is the key there. But Go ahead.
You said it, Jeff. It's transparency across the design team. Well, I guess and the contractor, if they're on board, I think they should be all the time, right? At least as a design assist. But that's a whole nother conversation, right?
Yeah, exactly.
It's transparency. It's like, why did you set the project up that way? Well, because we have our reasons. Did you run that by all your consultants,
right?
MEP, the civil, the landscape, the structural? Hopefully the answer is yes, right?
Right. Yeah, it's amazing. I mean, it's amazing that one of the biggest challenges of coordinating a building is actually getting models to line up without having to move them. You know what I mean? And that's between structural engineer, MEP engineer, structural subcontractor, civil. I mean, you go down the list, it's like at some point there's always one player that did not use the right base point. You know what I mean? And it's amazing that we're still at that point in things, but it is what it is, right?
It's one of the most common questions. It really is.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, coordinate systems
I got
in
this
general.
model if you want to see it.
Oh, sure. Yeah. I think if you just,
I won't spend a lot of time on it, but
I think if you just share your screen, it's on the bottom left there. I think we should all see it.
Okay.
I'm sure Paul is passionate about this topic because that's beautiful. You you taught a class on shared coordinates, Paul, right? I don't have the guts to actually do that.
Yeah, it's scary, man.
yeah. It's well, because the trick is to cherry pick the topics you're going to cover and make sure you don't promise comprehensive. Because that's when you'll get into trouble. I was talking to somebody else about that today. If you promise comprehensive, then you have to show everything, and then that's when you get into trouble. I have not built this one yet. This one is so complex. I thought, let me build it in Revit first. But
nice.
This is a bajillion. Like every gear is a separate family, so it's a pretty complex model. But so to answer the questioner's question, yes, I have built at least one of these in Revit. So awesome. Here it is.
And on the idea of coordinates too, I was just thinking about RevitPeer.com. Nicholas is over there. I don't know if you guys know him. Cool guy, but he did a class that built, and he also has a really, really good blog post on coordinate systems, and he did a great job at explaining. It's actually I use that most of the time when someone asks me to explain it. I'll try and explain it verbally, but then I'll send them the post and like, just read this, because it's probably the closest you'll get to sort of understanding the internal shared project and all that lovely coordinate system stuff. But you're right, that is a brave move to teach it. But then again, I think half the room will probably still get lost and you'll be okay, right? Let's see, a couple of trying to read through some of his questions here. Construction documents using this. So somebody was saying that BIM 360 design has helped them with some of their file size issues with all of these separate documentation that we're talking about, the disciplines. That's not really a question.
No, but that's good to know, though.
Yeah.
That's known too.
Yeah, I guess in the reality is if it's all hosted technically in the same spot and your only limitation is getting to it through bandwidth, I think that's going to help a little, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then if somebody sees a bigger issues with users in a model when they're trying to document. Well, I don't know if you guys know this, and I'm talking by the general public, but Revit actually hates two-dimensional stuff. So, I mean, it's actually, I think John Pearson posted something where it was like file sizes. There was a file that had like 3D objects, and then a file that was just a bunch of lines, and it was like 4 times the size or something like that. So, in general, if you're doing a lot of documentation, Revit actually hates 2D stuff. I mean, performance-wise, I've always noticed that. That could be part of it, but otherwise there are also 30 people in a model, which 30 people in a model, if you're just general work sharing in an office, that'll be...
That's an issue as well. There's a lot of, I mean...
Actually, you know what? Sorry, but that was a question that I talked to somebody about. Somebody was saying that they read somewhere, either Autodesk had it published or somebody published that there should only be, it was like 15 or 20 people working in a central file at the same time. I've never actually heard a number. I know for a fact that when you get to a certain limit, shit is bad. I mean, but for the most part, I haven't heard anyone publishing like you shouldn't have more than 15 people.
Well, I think it's fair to say the more you have, the slower it can become, especially if everybody's trying to sync with Central at similar times. And, you're definitely going to have traffic jams. But yeah, I've never heard an exact number either, like don't exceed this. But I think practicality says a smaller team is going to not only perform better, but it'll just be easier to manage, right? Because you have fewer people that you have to coordinate your efforts with. But that's not always possible, right? Sometimes you just need a big team. So that's when it becomes really important that you have good model management, Right. So in addition to your work sharing setup, you have the way you've broken up your linked files so that maybe you have smaller teams within each central model, and then you link them all together for the broader coordination efforts. And some of that stuff you just have to test your own environment and see what the performance limitations are, and and try out different approaches that get you there. But it's not one metric. That's why I get frustrated sometimes when people just talk about file size. I mean, that was valid in the AutoCAD days, but file size is one of the many factors that can affect performance in Revit. But 3,000 unresolved warnings or 50 people trying to sync with Central at the same time, or a bunch of
elephants,
unnecessary 2D elements, or a bunch of lines on top of lines, whatever it is. There's a lot of factors that can affect the performance of a Revit model. So it's not just one thing to point to.
Right.
You got to practice a lot of things. Good model management. Like these days, we're taught to practice good personal hygiene. Well, good Revit hygiene is important too. So.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, no, that's good. That's it. And it was funny because when somebody said that, I was trying to get them to send me a link, and they couldn't find a link to anything. I've never actually heard of a number, but it'd be interesting to see if someone.
Well, I'm sure people have floated numbers, but whether or not they've been tested thoroughly to see whether that's a valid number, I don't think Autodesk has ever published a number.
No, I don't think so either. So there's actually a question that I think it probably stems from the idea of the shared origins and points and stuff that we were just talking about, and it said. Do you use a BIM execution plan to have pre-designed meetings to agree with those elements, base point and co-location point or collaboration point? I'm not really sure what they're saying there. And I hope so. So one of the things actually it's interesting is going from the architecture to the contractor side and sort of balancing the two. Ideally, the setup that I have when I'm creating BIM execution plans on the contractor side is ours ends up just being an addendum to the architects, because if that BIM execution plan is done right, in my opinion, it will have all that information that we were just talking about, right? So that's the origin point, how the model's set up, the links and the trees, and however you're setting all the stuff, the file date, all that stuff. Ideally, that's set up in the BIM execution plan. I think the problem right now is that either people aren't doing them, or they're just done later on in the game after those decisions were made that Paul and Marcello were talking about, and then it just becomes a thing because everyone says you need one. So I don't know. I mean, Marcello, are your design partners setting up BIM execution plans immediately?
On the large projects, yes. Yeah, I would say for the most part, yes.
Are they discussing those with you, or they're just setting them up and handing them to you and saying...
Quite
I said
honestly,
design
the
partners.
reality
I'm not
is
singling out a company, just
you're
partners.
set up and you kind of
Some of those partners
set
might
up.
be on the call. He's got to be careful how he
I got to be
answers.
careful with what I say, but I'll give you the political answer. What that tends to happen where that BIM execution plan is set up, and then as a design consultant, like a structural, you tend to walk into it. We have had projects where they author the BIM execution plan when every design consultant is on board, and then they pass it around and allow the consultants for comment. Like, is this make? Because a lot of times at the BIM execution plan, they're very demanding. So it's like you will name your families this way in Revit, and they can be granular like that, and then that can really hurt the workflow, go against the workflow of an office. Like, well, gosh, is that really necessary? Because of that reason, it's a little disruptive. Can we? So the ability to have everyone kind of author it is the best, and we've had projects like that. Although fortunately, that's not always the case. And if we're talking about, don't get me started on BIM execution plans, but there's two more things I want to say. One is, it depends who authors it, because you said about the contractor side and the design side. Sometimes the language isn't clear. It'll be like, structural will do this, but then it's like, wait, do you mean the structural fabricator, or do you mean the? And so sometimes there's confusion that way. Another thing that we found too is the BIM execution plan is only as good as if it's followed. So there may be an elaborate one, and halfway through the project, we're like, did you
actually do that? Yeah.
Is this consistent with the, and that, that's just a, that's just a guideline. So it's like, I think of a BIM execution plan as like a plant. It's this beautiful plant, but if you don't water it, it's going to die. So with the BIM execution plan, you got to be like, okay, remember, we're all following it, and then 2 months later, don't forget, and then a year later, hey, we got to make sure we keep following that, or we modify it because things don't make sense. But I think of it like a living document. But I think it's necessary because it lays out a lot of that stuff that's important, because there's a lot of stuff. Of course, there's a lot of stuff that's not important in there too.
I think going into going into family naming and type naming and view, like that kind of stuff, I think is a little too much. But having it, the ones that I found the most successful are the ones where it literally says, here's all the models, here's how they're linked together, here's the origin point, here's the levels, that kind of stuff, and it just says, here's how the model's set up. It's not a prescription of how you should do the model. It's a prescription of, hey, this is how we set it up. And then that becomes a document. And then all we do on the contractor side is append our piece where it says, okay, and then here's how the coordination process and the model and the fabrication stuff is going to be set up. So it's and I can tell you from experience that one of the issues is what you just mentioned, where it's only as good as if it's followed. And design teams who set them up don't follow them. That still becomes a document that gets passed along. So then our subcontractors, if you're a construction management company, usually they are using these as their guideline. And so they're looking at them saying, well, the architect said all this stuff, but then I'm looking at the model and it's like, this has nothing to do with this. And so as much as it's like it's as good as it's being followed, that thing is getting carried through and people are seeing it. And so that's why I think being less prescriptive and more sort of just overall sort of picture of it is probably the better move.
Yeah, I'm all for less is more. Maybe they do like one. I'm all about the one-page summaries. Maybe each discipline gets like 2 pages. That's it. It's just a little cheat sheet, and it's all bullet pointed so that it's really simple to read. Because I think sometimes it's a little overwhelming and it's kind of hard to follow sometimes.
Yes.
But I think it goes back full circle with what you said is in the very beginning, which was transparency. Right? You're not sure. Like a lot of times things aren't lining up, and you're not so sure. Right? Ideally, in an ideal world, that BIM execution plan would lay out how the whole project is. So that's the current document. You read that, and then a snapshot of exactly how everything is kind of organized. I think that's the ideal world, and we've had projects like that. But okay. Anyway,
no, that's awesome. No, that's great.
What else?
I'm not surprised that we went on for 5 minutes about BIM execution plans.
I have an announcement. If you want me to make one,
let's do it.
You can announcement.
Yeah, let's do it.
It goes back to what we were talking about with the elephant.
Okay.
Sweet. Here we go.
Uh-oh.
Okay, so before I've all the models that I've done and all the classes I've done. Anyway, there hasn't been really a central place for it. Anyways, I've started looking into the content management systems, and I partnered with Unify. And so,
nice.
What now? Let me share my screen. You can do now, all the content I've ever created is now actually hosted in one spot. Can I share my screen? How does this work?
On the bottom left, I think you just hit the little computer-looking thing, and it should pop up.
There it is.
Do you see my?
I see me, so I think it's the wrong screen. Or you gotta just pull it over.
Everyone see this now? Can you see this? Okay, so Unify is a content management system. Anyway, it has in here like common manufacturing companies. So anyway, they were gracious enough to host all my content.
Oh,
I called it Marcello. So what you're gonna get if you're a Unify customer, I'll talk about how you get this if you're not, but you get access to this folder, and it's got all the families I've ever created in my life. So there's the elephant. This is the first time.
That's the first elephant.
That's the first time. I've never released it ever. So here it is. And there's a bunch of other stuff in here, stuff you've never really seen before. That anyway, it's all here. So you can go and look at it. Yeah, there's a topography.
Yep, I remember that class.
Batmobile.
Okay, so if you're not a Unify customer, you can get a demo and you can get all this content for free.
That's it. Right? YouTube's gonna flag the video now. We're done. That's awesome, man. That's really cool.
All right. So that's brand new off the press.
There's gonna be Revit elephants everywhere now.
That's true, but that's okay. It's in the name of education.
That's right.
And it looks like we got some Unify fans out there, unless that's like a Unify owner or something. That'd be pretty funny. saying Unify is awesome. So I guess so we're running it's 5:10, so maybe we'll take one last question, and then we'll wrap up. Thanks again, guys, for doing this. This was pretty sweet. I'm assuming everyone enjoyed it. There's a ton of chatter going on the and this will be saved on YouTube right afterwards. I'll post about it on the blog tomorrow. Let me just see. There was one last question. Can you provide any insight on the new internal origin point use and purpose? Oh, maybe we should let Paul take this, right? Because he's the origin guy all of a sudden.
the origin point thing. I mean, okay. You want my cynical answer? Or?
Yeah, I do.
I mean, the cynical answer is everybody kept asking for it, and so they just gave it to them, and but you can't do anything with it. It's just saying this is the internal origin in Revit. So if you care and if you want to see it, here it is. You can't snap to it. You can't touch it. I mean, I'm kind of bothered that you can't snap to it. I mean, I would think you should at least be able to do that. But it is purely just there to give you the warm and fuzzy, like, this is my Revit origin. But that is the built-in permanent origin that can't be moved. All the other stuff can be moved around, but that's what it's all based on. So that's it. That's all it is.
Yep. And I would add that it also, you've probably all ran into this already. It defaults on in the default template, I believe.
For old projects,
yes, for old projects.
If you're starting clean, you're good. But you're upgrading projects, it's a pain in the neck.
I will. Go ahead. Go ahead.
I was going to say, then, Paul, are you saying that they shouldn't have put it in?
I mean, I'm saying, be careful what you ask for. That's what I'm saying.
The nice thing about it is when you're trying to explain origin points. Yeah, and it's there instead of drawing like reference planes and like moving things, because that's the old way of how I explain it, right? Is to locate it and then move all the other ones and be like, see, it's still here.
Or linking an AutoCAD file, which is what a lot of us would do if we wanted to say where the origin was. But like, no, I think it's fine to have it. I agree with Jeff. It's kind of an oversight on their part that they didn't think about how all the other projects would upgrade.
Yes.
That's unfortunate, but there's immediately a bunch of Dynamo scripts that popped up online to fix that. So, I mean, it's definitely a manageable thing, and that's one of those problems that eventually goes away, right? Like, because as you do more and more projects, that becomes more of a legacy issue. So, no, I think it's great to have it. It's definitely useful when you're trying to troubleshoot or explain things to people, but it doesn't. It's not new functionality. It's just exposing something that's always been there. Yeah. So, you couldn't see it visually even before, and now you can.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's a look, don't touch, right?
Kind of. It's a look, don't touch. Exactly.
Right,
Yeah.
right. And it's really annoying when you look and see it everywhere and you can't turn it off without going
Yeah,
into
and
visibility.
then you got to turn it off everywhere. Yeah. I do like that it's a totally unique icon, not just a variation of the other two. So that was helpful so that it stands out. I don't like that every link just goes gray. So you got 20 of them that are all gray and you can't tell them apart, especially if they're on top of each other. So it would be nice if they were different colors, or I don't know. But again, it's be careful what you ask for.
Exactly. Well, that was we ended on origin points. Oh, I wasn't expecting that. But I guess when you go down that road, you're going to talk about them, right?
Yeah, there's a couple things in Revit that if you go into a crowded room, you could have newbies and old-time experts and everybody in between. But there's a few words you can say that'll get everybody's head to turn.
That's true.
And shared coordinates is one of them. Yep. So it doesn't matter if they're a brand new Revit user or if they've been using it for years. You say shared coordinates and everybody wants to hear what you have to say. So it's definitely one of those topics. So it's understandable that there was a lot of questions on that.
Yeah.
So
definitely. Yeah. Most certainly. Awesome. All right. Well, so it's 5:13, went a little over, which is fine. Part of the reason why I end these at 5, for me it's 5 o'clock, is 5 o'clock is we have, we call it the 5 o'clock frenzy in my house. So for whatever reason, my son, my dog, and just everyone at 5 o'clock, it just erupts. The dog wants to eat, my son wants to eat, everyone's crying, and you probably hear in the background, sorry, but so I want to thank you guys for coming. Maybe let everyone know where they can find you. Paul, you can start there, where everyone can find you.
PaulAubin.com. PaulAubin.com. Yep.
Cool. And Marcello?
You can Google me. You can Google my name, and then I'm on LinkedIn. You could go to my website, simplycomplex.org.
Yep, and I'll put links in the blog post tomorrow when this goes out. So thank you guys for joining me. This was awesome. And to everyone else out there, I'm going to try and do a few more of these, especially since we're all probably going to be stuck at home for at least another couple weeks, I would think. So this is a good time to chit-chat and do this kind of stuff, which is pretty sweet. Actually, Marcello, just one thing that I wanted to bring up. I remember a long time ago somebody asked you how you found time to do some of the things like the Revit Elephant and stuff. And in your answer, I believe at the time, was you did it on your train to work. So now how do you find time to do all this stuff since you're not taking the train to work?
It's actually a lot harder because I don't have a lot of downtime where I'm not doing anything. So I'll just stick it in the nooks and crannies of things. Yep. So like when I'm making dinner, that's when I'll do it. Anytime along the but yes, good point. I have less time to kind of mentally do it.
It's a challenge.
So I'll squeeze it in nooks and crannies. I'm walking the dog. I'm going for a run. That sort of thing. Yeah.
Awesome. All right. Well, everyone have a wonderful day. Have a wonderful night, depending on where you are. And we'll talk to everyone later.
Okay.
Thanks, Jeff.
You got it. All right, guys. I'll talk to you later. Thank you so much for doing this. I really appreciate it. We're